big deadline looms for Texas power providers to prepare their plants for freezing weather.
We're getting away from recommendations and plans and promises, and we're requiring real changes.
We go one-on-one with the man in charge of making sure the Texas grid is ready for winter, his message about the mandates and the penalties. The governor orders state agencies to tackle what he calls obscene content in schools, the books that led to his order, and why it could be a key issue for campaign season. A new task force aims to change state policy after the deadly tragedy at a Houston music festival, how the results could affect concert fans in Texas. A baby bust in Texas? The state's birth rate drops at a faster pace than the national average, why the numbers could be bad news for the Texas economy.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. The winter storm that hit Texas in February left millions of Texans without power and heat. Lawmakers passed several mandates to make sure that never happens again. Now it's up to the Public Utility Commission to get those changes implemented, including a December 1st deadline for power providers to weatherize their equipment. But will the grid be ready for winter? Maggie Glenn went one-on-one with the PUC chairman, Peter Lake, to get insight about the steps they're taking now.
Obviously, this is something that's on a lot of Texans' minds after what happened back in February. So we kind of wanted to start at the beginning at first. We wanted you to kind of walk us through exactly what went wrong.
What went wrong in February? Everything that possibly could, unfortunately. I think the bottom line is everything that went wrong, that possibly could go wrong, went wrong. And that's what we've been working to fix since then. We've been working both on the operational side and the physical infrastructure side to make sure we mitigate as many of these challenges as possible before we get to this winter.
And that kind of plays right into my next question. What specifically has the PUC done since February to ensure the integrity of the grid, to make sure it's more stable heading into the winter months?
First and foremost, we've implemented winterization requirements for the first time ever. By December 1st, all generators in ERCOT must be up to the federal winterization standards. And in addition to that, they must be able to prove that they have mitigated anything that went wrong last winter. So above and beyond the federal standards. And so we know going into this winter, our physical infrastructure will be more resilient than it was last winter. In addition to that, we've made drastic changes in the way ERCOT operates. We've built in an additional margin of safety by buying more power reserves, and we've started operating with an abundance of caution so that, unlike in the past when ERCOT waited until the very last minute to use their authority to force generators online, now if ERCOT has even a hint of trouble on the horizon, they exercise that authority to put generators online sooner rather than later. And for the first time ever, we have formalized a working group within the State Operations Center that has representatives from the PUC, the Railroad Commission, the Department of Transportation, and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality sitting shoulder to shoulder in the State Operations Center on a daily basis so that those emergency operators know each other, they've worked together, they've identified in advance the vulnerabilities we may have, and they know the partners in each of their industries that they need to rely on in an emergency situation.
And obviously what happened in February, they called it a once in 100-year storm, but we saw something slightly similar happen back in 2011, but we didn't see enough action. We saw a lot of recommendations, but not a lot of action. So we were wondering if you could talk through which of the recommendations from back in 2011 were actually implemented this time around to again ensure the reliability of the grid.
The most important is the winterization requirement that we have recently enacted. And that requires all of our generators to meet the federal standards that were set after that 2011 winter event. And that can be anything from insulation around key equipment, heat tracing around pipes, windbreaks in front of air intakes. It's a wide variety of mechanisms that can be used to enhance a generator's resiliency in extreme winter events. So that's a substantial change, and it's not cheap for these companies to do it, and it requires a lot of manpower, a lot of equipment, and our generators have largely been good partners in getting ahead of the curve on that, and we expect them to be ready by the December 1st deadline, and we're going to be inspecting them and holding them accountable to that.
And speaking of that December 1st deadline, we know that they have to submit the plans for readiness, but does that mean that the companies have to implement those plans by then, or do their plans just need to be submitted by then?
Oh, that's implementation. We're getting away from recommendations and plans and promises, and we're requiring real changes. ERCOT is hiring up a brand new inspection team as we speak. These folks are going to be out in the field inspecting generators to make sure that the plans are more than just the promises, and making sure that there's real structural changes on these units on the ground in time for this winter. There's no choice for our generators. They have to be winterized by December 1st, or they'll face a penalty of up to $1 million per day per incident.
Is there anything more you would want lawmakers to consider going forward? I know they said this is kind of just a starting point, but anything you would maybe hope they spend a little more time on or attention to going forward that could, again, just help the future of the grid?
The landmark legislation from the 87th session in SB2 and SB3 was truly a once-in-a-generation reform that gave us all of the tools we need to enact the changes that we're making. Of course, those changes don't happen overnight. We've made drastic changes in the operations of ERCOT. We've implemented new winterization regulations to ensure that our physical infrastructure is much more resilient this winter than last winter, and a variety of other changes to ensure that we continue to have a reliable grid for Texas. But we've still got a lot of work to do. As you saw in April and June, and in the high prices in late August and October, our grid still needs a lot of work. We're not out of the woods yet. We've made tremendous strides, and we'll continue to work to make sure we get it right. But we've got the tools that we need, and we're going to continue working to make sure that we make full use of those legislative tools.
And final question for you, if you could just have one message for the average Texan sitting at home a little bit nervous as temperatures are continuing to drop as we get closer to winter, how would you reassure them that we will make it through this winter without another February 2021 winter crisis?
While we all know there are no guarantees in Texas weather, you should know that we have taken drastic steps to ensure we have a more resilient infrastructure, we've got more reliable operations, and we are doing everything possible to ensure we have a reliable grid this winter.
Part of ERCOT's Winter Storm After Action Plan included steps to improve communication with the public. One item in that plan has the new ERCOT interim CEO traveling across the state on a listening tour. Brad Jones spoke to people in Capel earlier this month. The tour aims to provide information about how the grid operates and to hear perspectives from various communities. ERCOT scheduled another listening event this week in Waco. They'll hit Frisco, College Station, and Groesbeck in early December. Birth rates are dropping faster in Texas, bringing concern about the long-term impact.
First and foremost, they affect the number of workers in the future labor force. So that impacts economic growth.
What experts say about the decline and what it could do to the Texas economy. Governor Abbott orders state agencies to tackle what he calls obscene content in public schools, the book that led to his order and the potential campaign impact. The Astroworld tragedy leads to a new state task force. How the ideas they're considering could affect your concert experience.